Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing okay today. Let me check my volume. People always laugh when I say that because it sounds like I'm saying volume. That's my accent. But while I check this, if you guys enjoy what I'm putting down, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the content through PayPal or Patreon if you don't necessarily or, for that matter, super chats. Speaking of that, this is part 2 of the cheaters saga. Looking out over the United States, I keep being told of this ubiquitous Russian. This was in the news just last week, talking about there may be potential influence of the Russians in the elections. It's not the goddamn Russians. Yes, there may be foreign adversaries that may want to influence the elections. But what I'm trying to present and what I try to get across to you is that the ubiquitous voter fraud myth that's perpetrated, the shutting down of polling locations, the trying to make lines longer than they need to be, the making it difficult for Americans to vote, those things actively influence the electoral process. The interstate cross-check where millions of Americans, eligible voters, were thrown off the voter rolls. In New York, where they threw off 200,000 people off the rolls, illegally threw them off the rolls. In Florida, where they literally destroyed the ballot so you couldn't necessarily go behind and actually check whether election results were accurate. And even in situations after the election where they make it difficult to determine, because they make it difficult to check the election results. Election took place, we don't need to see whether or not it was legit or not. I'm making a point to you that these are the things that impact, influence, directly influence, tangibly influence your elections. If the Russians are on that list, they are far, far, far down on that list. Pursuant to that, Krillin 876, blaming Russians is like saying who farted when you did. Essentially being in an elevator, cutting one, and looking around at the person. Did you do that? Did you do that? Or better yet, being in the bed, you and your wife, you cut one and you look at your wife and say, did you do that? Krillin, yes, exactly. Trudy, Palace, Democrats rigged primaries, Republicans rigged general. Yes. Yes. I've said as much myself. The shutting down of polling locations, saying, hey, we have too many polling locations. When there was an expectation that there were going to be more voters, not less, because Sanders was in the race. They did that because they knew it would make a line longer and create a disincentive for people to vote. The one that I just did where they've gotten one polling location for 27,000 people when the average in the rest of the state is like 1,200. And they moved that to somewhere that is not even on the bus line. That particular area is a majority area, meaning there's a large area, a group of Hispanics that is in that particular area. And they're making it difficult for those people to vote. Many of those people are poor. Many of those people may not necessarily be able to take the day off. Many of them may not be able to get to point A to point B if there's not a bus line. They make it difficult to vote. The goal is not necessarily to stop each and every person from voting. The goal is to shave off just enough to win. I've shown this before because I think this is somewhat of a damning thing. Back during the election, we keep hearing Russians were the reason Hillary Clinton lost that race. I would argue that Hillary Clinton was the reason Hillary Clinton lost that race, and there's a litany of things, everything from cheating Sanders to choosing Tim Kaine to not necessarily reaching out legitimately to the left and to the anger and dealing with, intangibly dealing with the failures that is the Democratic Party. Hope and change. Hope and change. 95% of the worth of this country to the top 1%. Hope and change. That's the opposite of hope and change. It's more like continuity. Cross-check in action. Trump's margin of victory in Michigan, 13,000. Michigan cross-check purge list, 449,000. Trump's margin of victory in Arizona, 85,000. Arizona purge list, 270,000. Trump's victory margin in North Carolina, 177,000. Purge list, 589,000 in North Carolina. Those are just 3 states. Those 3 states alone was enough to give Donald Trump the election. Now, Hillary Clinton not going to Wisconsin, yeah, that's a problem. Hillary Clinton or her husband passing NAFTA and having those jobs being bled out the country while simultaneously being told that this was going to be a job boom. Yes, many of those things adversely affect Hillary Clinton's chances. But when you're looking at around the margins, right here, it's not the goddamn Russians. That's my point. That's why I do these stories. It's not the Russians. Let's go to the next one. Georgia. Georgia has purged 340,000 people off the voter rolls. The election comes up in a few weeks. Georgia has purged 340,000. That's not the Russians. That is not the Russians. GOP candidate improperly purged 340,000 people from the voter rolls, investigation claims. Now, I'm going to let Greg Palast explain this, and I'll come back in momentarily.
Of 550,000 voters. He used the postcard trick. Kemp sent out millions of these cards, requiring voters to confirm their addresses. Problem? They look like junk mail. 8 out of 10 voters who get them throw them away. Throw away the card, and Kemp can throw you off the rolls. The trick? Not everyone gets a postcard. Mostly, they go to neighborhoods like this.
This is my neighborhood, and this is where I almost got purged.
Just to explain this, because I don't necessarily want them to demonetize this video or strike me for some kind of copyright strike. They would send out a postcard, and they would say, look, you haven't voted in 3 years. We need to know that you still exist and that you're still a voter. Now, if you throw away the postcard or if you don't respond to that, they can take you off the voter rolls. The interesting part to this is that, again, the goal in this is not to get each and every person. The goal is to shave enough people off the margins. And there is demographic data, statistical demographic data, where you know certain voters are going to be more likely to respond to this than other voters. What I mean by this is, right here, Rolling Stones talked about this back in the 2016 election. This postcard game, and this is in relation to the 2016. But again, this is the same thing being replicated, just in this time in the state of Georgia. This postcard game amplifies cross-checks built-in racial bias. According to the Census Bureau, white voters are 21% more likely than black voters or Hispanics to respond to the official requests. Homeowners are 32% more likely to respond than renters, and the young are 74% less likely than the old to respond. If you know, these are democratic voters, meaning that this trick is prejudiced against Democratic voters. It's understood from a statistical standpoint, meaning when you do this, you already know that the people who are going to fill this out and send this back are going to be your voters. It allows you, in a statistical way, to shave off the voters that you don't particularly want voting in the first place. Let's go to this point. Right here. Greg Palast, a journalist and director of the Greg Palast Investigative Fund, said an analysis he commissioned found 340,134 voters were removed from the rolls on the grounds that they had moved, but they actually still live at the address where they're registered. Their registration is canceled. Not pending, not inactive, canceled. If they show up to vote on November 6th, they will not be allowed to vote. That's wrong. Palast told reporters on a call on Friday, we can prove they're still there. They should be allowed to vote. Palast said the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda filed a lawsuit against Kemp on Friday to force him to release the additional records related to the state's removal of voters. Under Georgia's procedures, registered voters who have not cast a ballot for 3 years are sent a notice asking them to confirm that they still live at their address. If they don't return it, they are marked inactive. If they don't vote for 2 more general elections after that, they are removed from the rolls. Georgia removed more than 534,000 voters that way in 2016 and 2017. Using database employed by commercial mailing firms, analysts commissioned by Palace Group found 334,000 of those citizens actually still live at their address registered. Of the rest, 41,000 had in fact moved out of the state. 8,990 moved from one county to another county in Georgia. More than 19,000 had died. Others could not be determined. It's the latest voting right controversy to crop up in Georgia's governor race, which pits Republican Kemp against Democrat Stacey Abrams, who, if elected, will become the first African-American governor or woman governor of any state. Lawsuits have also charged that Kemp blocked registration of 50,000 would-be voters, 80% of them black, Latino, or Asian, because of the minor discrepancies in the spelling or spacing of their name. Another suit targeted the state's most divisive county after it rejected an unusually large number of absentee ballots. They're making it difficult for people to vote. I hadn't flipped it over, I'm sorry. All of these are at the bottom. They're at the bottom so you can see for yourself. This is not the goddamn Russians. That's all I'm saying. Abrams has been trying to register hundreds of thousands of eligible voters. Kemp has been against this for obvious reasons, because those voters are going to vote Democrat. In fact, there's a secret recording where Kemp expressed concern at the number of people that were being registered to vote. Jesus Christ. I have too many things up. He expressed concern at the number of people that were eligible to vote. The funny part is, Greg Palast confronted Kemp on this. Let's see if I can show this. Yeah, right here. Right here. All right, let's flip it.
Mr. Kemp, are you removing black voters from the voter rolls just so you can win this election? Why are you purging voters from the voter rolls? Sir, why aren't you answering my questions? Sir, why do we have to sue you to get the names of voters who've been removed? Why are you... Let go of me right now, sir. Okay, is there any other reporter being thrown out here?
Sir, he said you specifically.
So that's Greg Palast.
Personally, I love that. I love that. Are you removing black voters so you can win, sir? Are you? Is that, sir? I love that. I love that. I love that. And Greg Palast has that hat on. I love that, man. I love that. This is a fascinating race. The guy who's trying to keep voters off the voter rolls in order to win versus the woman who's trying to register voters. This is a fascinating race. All right. I'm going to end this. I don't want this to be too long. And it seems like my stream is getting a little dicey. So if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support the content through Patreon. All right, by the way, this is not a Democrat-Republican issue to me. You know, when... Part of the reason that the Democratic Party never brings up cheating, they don't ever touch that rail. That is not a rail they're willing to touch. John Kerry will lose that race to Bush, even though it looks dodgy. Al Gore will lose that race to Bush, even though it looks dodgy. And Hillary Clinton, even after knowing this, because this was one of those things that was mentioned, would not bring stuff like this up. Because ultimately, the election is a changeover of power. These parties, these political parties, would be warring factions if a war broke out between the two sections. The changeover of power is essentially one government being brutally changed over, but done so in a peaceful way. They don't want to touch that particular rail. Now, if us, in what's supposed to be a democratic process where we, one man, one vote, make decisions on who to lead us, if that is being gamed and if that is being cheated, then we don't have control of our political apparatus. And that there are people who are running, you could say the lunatics, running the asylum undetached from the voter bloc because they've been gaming the system in order to get elected. This is dramatically important. No, this video is not going to get a lot of views, but this video is dramatically important. It is necessary to get this across. That it's not the goddamn Russians. That the issue here is the way your parties game the political system in order to get advantages to stay in power. It's not the goddamn Russians. 300,000 people purged off the rolls in Georgia. Tens of thousands slow walked. African Americans, many of which, I think 80%, prevented from being put on the voter rolls. This is a big fucking deal. This needs to change. All right, I'm going to end this because, again, I don't want this one to go too long. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. Thanks all.